Good morning. I'm delighted to be co-moderating this session on Africa um, with a distinguished panel today. My co-moderator is James Wanjohi, who's on the other end. Clearly, Africa has been on people's mind for a while, and right now, the Economist article in some ways summarized the phenomenal opportunities and the phenomenal aspiration, maybe not doing justice fully to the real aspiration. That's what we want to listen today. Africa, as the Economist stated, is the world's fastest growing continent. And I thank you for joining us today in this conversation. From my perspective, if I may have a quick round of introduction of the panelists. With me on my right, we have His Excellency President Obasanjo, who is the former president of Nigeria, who I will request to go first and share his insights. On his right is from Kenya, from the Raila Odinga Center, is Christopher Khaemba, who is the executive director there. On my right is Her Excellency Youssouf Hadidja, who is the Minister of Education for Cameroon. And on the extreme right is James Wanjohi, who runs the Education Solutions part of GEMS in Africa. So what I'll request from all the panelists is to talk for about 5 or 10 minutes to share their views on and impressions on Africa, talk a bit about what they think is not working, as well as talk about if they had one thing to change, what would that be? And after we have had the conversation with the panelists, we will open it for Q&A. Your Excellency.
Thank you very much. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I think the way I want to start is to underline what the moderator had said, and that is, well, as of today, things are looking up for Africa. There's no doubt about that. And the point that we must worry about, or we must not lose sight of, is that we must find ways and means by which these things that are looking up will be sustained and will be sustainable. And if there's one major instrument for things that are looking up in Africa to be sustained and to be made sustainable, it is education. The question that will come to our mind will be, when you talk about education, the question is, education for what? Education for what? Education for development? Education as a meal ticket? Education for unity in countries like mine, Nigeria, where we have great diversity? Education for progress? Even education for democracy and good governance? Now, all these and more, for me, are the purposes and reasons for education. Now, if these are, what then must we pay very important attention to? And you ask that question. One thing, I will have more than one thing, unfortunately. The first thing is the access to education. There must be popular participation in education. No child must be prevented from having education. For me, at least the first 9 years in school. Because if a child can spend 9 years in school, I think he or she can manage the rest of his life. 9 good years in good school will be enough preparation ground for a child, a girl or boy, to get by for the rest of his life. That is the first thing to me that is very important. Access. The second thing that I will, as you ask, or if you like, you can put the two together since you want one, is the curricula. When you look at it and when you go into it, we seem to have been doing the same thing year in, year out. Not much has changed. At one time in my country, the concern was quality of education. And I looked into what my children were learning. I found that they were not really much different from what I was learning, what I learned at their level when I was in school. But should we continue that way? Shouldn't certain things change? Let me illustrate what I'm saying by an experience I had. And a few years back, I was with the Egyptian minister in charge of youth. And we were talking. Before he became Minister for Youth Development, he was the Vice Chancellor of a university. And according to him, he thought that he was turning out the best product from his university for his country. When he became Minister for Youth, he found out that his products were no use for the economy. They were unemployable, and yet they were university graduates. So he was faced with a problem. And according to him, what did he do? He then decided to say, look, there will now be extra 1 year to now give these graduates skill that can make them employable either by those who want them or to be self-employed. Now, shouldn't we then now look at our curricula so that we stop producing job seekers? We start producing job creators. Because in my own country, when you ask somebody, why you are reading sociology in the university, with what in view? To get a job. That is the purpose. Is that relevant? If it's not relevant, then when he has finished 4 or 5 years in the university, where is the job? And then let me bring the Nigerian perspective in 2 or 3 areas. We are a country where diversity is part of our makeup. And on two occasions when I've had to run the affairs of Nigeria. One, as a military head of state, and later as an elected, democratically elected president. Education was very key consideration for me. As military head of state, I introduced UPE, Universal Primary Education. And it was necessary because the diversity in our country, it goes also with an element of disparity in education. So when you have the diversity that we have and the disparity in education, we are in the South generally, but more particularly in the Southwest, the level of education is much, much higher than in the Northeast. And that disparity, that difference shows clearly in things like maternal mortality, infant mortality, even population management, because the level or the access to education and level of education in the Northeast is lower than in the Southwest, it aggravates the incidence of infant mortality and maternal mortality in the Northeast compared with the Southwest. And that is one very telling impact of access to education, which I mentioned. Then I believe that in a country like Nigeria, education should be for what I have said earlier, but also education must be an instrument of unity, an instrument of bringing us together, an instrument for blunting the diversity that we have. And we have tried that with varying success. At one time, we have something we call unity schools. These are secondary schools that are dotted all over the country. And the policy of the unity schools is that 50% must be from the area where the school is located, and 50% must be from all over the country. It has helped, but it wasn't good enough. We need to do more than that. I tried something that I must admit didn't quite work as I wanted it to work. When I was military head of state, all the vice chancellors of our universities are produced internally within the area where the university was located. And I said, look, this is inbreeding, if you like. Let's spread it out. So let's have a vice chancellor who is from the Southeast to be in charge of a university in the Northwest. It's the universities themselves that rejected it. It did not work as I thought it should work. But I believe that, and of course now we've gone past that stage. Maybe I was ahead of my time. Now it goes without anybody worrying about it. So diversity, there must be removal of educational I use the word education disparity should not be imposed on diversity. The second point that I will want to talk about is consistency. We have policies that go on. I talk about UPE. When I was military head of state, we started UPE all over the country. and it was going well. When I left, the succeeding government said they had no money to continue UP, and they scrapped it. They just scrapped it. When I came back as elected president, I started something now I call UBE, because we have taken, I wanted to take education, universality of education to the level of 9 years that I talk about. So 6 years in primary school and 3 years in junior secondary school. So we call it UBE, Universal Basic Education. It started, again, going like bomb. And we have this thing that we call federal system in Nigeria. And a government in one of the states took me to the Supreme Court and said, I have no business in primary education. And the court upheld and said, yes, I had no business in primary education. But how can I level up? How can I remove disparity? I cannot start from primary level if I cannot start from the basics. So again, I have to devise, how do I deal with this? So I come up with something that I call matching grant. You put so much in primary education at your state level, I put so much to help you. And that was the indirect way I could intervene and really ensure that we are able to level up. I think I will want to stop at this point because you said you gave me 10 minutes and I think I've used 10 minutes. But thank you very much.
Thank you very much, President Obasanjo. If I can now move to the next panelist, Christopher. Please
Thank you.
Go ahead.
Yeah. Christopher Khaemba from Kenya, and really exciting listening to the breadth and the depth of the presentation by His Excellency. I want to take a very few minutes. I think he's outlined great areas that we can interrogate and share further thoughts from His Excellency, President Obasanjo. So, 2 areas. I've had an advantage to head a school called African Leadership Academy in South Africa. I was actually the founding dean. And this school was established to introduce tenets of leadership and other values at high school level. Sometimes, quite often, high schools have focused more on academic work and exercises and whatnot, and really sidestepped what we think is Africa's #1 problem. We have had progress there as well, but many times globally, Africa's #1 problem has been described as leadership. But we are lucky on this continent. You know, we have icons like President Obasanjo, Mandela in South Africa, and a few examples. And a few of us thought, if we brought the question of leadership and introduced role models of good leadership in business, politics, health, on all sectors, social sectors at high school, that could probably begin to have a generation of leaders in our continent that can shape the continent appropriately and so on. Hence the purpose for that school. And while running this school, we brought kids from close to 49 countries across Africa. I visited many of your countries. And one thing one notices are different educational systems across the continent again, either for good or bad, the advantages of that, and the diversity, you know, His Excellency talks about. You find this on the continent, even in educational systems as well. French-speaking countries, English-speaking countries, where instruction again is in those languages, is in Portuguese, and so on. But the kids we pick, when given opportunities at primary level, and it must really start at ECD. I think in one of the sessions, somebody talked about an area we had overlooked in the deliberations here, early childhood development education. That really is a foundation. And when kids are given that foundation, they really progress well. And we could see this. We did some analysis, some survey amongst the students we brought down to Johannesburg at African Leadership Academy. And indeed, those that had early childhood development education, they started at that level. Even the instruction at this school was in English. If they were from French-speaking West Africa or North Africa, they picked the language very easily because the core curriculum here was Cambridge A-levels. And you know, for a kid in 6 months to make sense of a new language, needs to be really brilliant. And we found that kids who had the advantage of early childhood development education were quicker, you know, to pick the languages and settle down. The other aspect from that vantage point of looking at Africa from the diversity of students that we had at African Leadership Academy was the question of refugees. The continent has upwards of 3 million children who have been displaced as a result of strife across the continent. And I had one girl from Sierra Leone who we picked her from Ivory Coast. I think Ivory Coast has another name now. Cote d'Ivoire, we picked her from Cote d'Ivoire. That girl called Ngozi. James was in South Africa at that time and was mentoring some of the kids. And this girl left her country with a mother during the war in Sierra Leone, and did not do much of high school, but we gave her an opportunity. You know, very brilliant girl at this school, and she was able to make very good grades. Right now she is at Amherst. Another boy from Southern Sudan, Paul Lorem, again given an opportunity. The point I want some thoughts here shared is how on this continent we can structure a process of identifying these kids and getting them into mainstream schools. Because many of them, if they're going to be the same people to help bring about change in their countries and on the continent, really. Then the last point is the case about Kenya, where I come from. I am actually education advisor to the Prime Minister. We've just had our elections in the country, and still things haven't settled, but hopefully they will. What we recently, the outgoing government, in the 10 years they've been in power, in 2003 they introduced what His Excellency introduced in his country a long time ago, free primary education. And the effect that had was, while in 2003 the transition from primary to secondary schools was 54%. In 2011, as a result of that change in the policy, the percentage was close to 80%, 78%. That is the impact. And we got a new constitution in the country that is strong on the Bill of Rights, especially for the children. And in all international conventions, we get this Bill of Rights where children under the age of 18 years, and I think that fits in the 9 years His Excellency talked about, really must be in school. So we have a constitution and a new act of parliament now that criminalizes the situation of kids being out of basic education. And the basic education will consist of early childhood, primary school and secondary school. So that now for the new government is going to be the one with the responsibility of implementing this, that education in Kenya now is, basic education is going to be free and compulsory, and so on. So the question of quality that His Excellency talked about, again, now becomes a point to discuss. But the point here is about me sharing thoughts and wanting to capture your thoughts on how we can mainstream structure the question of settling refugees across the continent. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Christopher. Now, Her Excellency, Minister from Cameroon, will present her remarks. I just wanted to ensure that anyone who did not understand French, if they wanted, there are some devices at the back for the translations. So please, if you can give 30 seconds for people to just...
Excellences, Mesdames et Messieurs, bonjour. Je suis Madame Youssouf Hadidja Alim, ministre de l'Éducation de base du Cameroun. Je voudrais, avec votre permission, saisir l'occasion qui m'est offerte ce matin pour déjà remercier les organisateurs et les autorités de Dubaï pour l'invitation à nous adresser, et aussi pour toutes les dispositions qui ont été prises pour rendre notre séjour à Dubaï agréable. Je voudrais également dire merci aux organisateurs pour l'opportunité offerte à nos pays de partager nos expériences. À ce niveau, permettez-moi, à la suite de Ses Excellences, Monsieur le Président Obasanjo, et le secrétaire d'État au Kenya, de dire en quelques mots ce que mon pays a pu réaliser dans le domaine de l'éducation. Donc, Mesdames et Messieurs, le Cameroun a développé au lendemain des indépendances un système éducatif très performant. Mais la récession qui a plongé le pays dans un marasme économique des années 80, a durement affecté les performances de ce système éducatif développé et qui s'est dégradé au fil des ans. Pour cela, des réformes significatives ont été opérées par le gouvernement camerounais afin de permettre au système éducatif d'atteindre les objectifs qui lui sont assignés, à savoir offrir à l'ensemble de la population un service universel de qualité. Des évolutions significatives ont été réalisées grâce à l'aménagement d'un nouveau cadre législatif et réglementaire. Je voudrais citer ici la loi portant sur l'orientation de l'éducation au Cameroun et la loi portant organisation de l'enseignement supérieur. Nous avions également élaboré plusieurs stratégies sectorielles, dont la première en 2001, la deuxième en 2004, la troisième en 2006, et il convient de dire que celle de 2006 est en cours de révision. La vision du Cameroun qui consacre, n'est-ce pas, la conduite du Cameroun vers l'émergence à l'horizon 2035, a conduit le Cameroun à élaborer dans ce cadre un document de stratégie pour la croissance et l'économie. Nous avions également assuré la mise en œuvre des politiques éducatives conséquentes, telles que l'établissement du diagnostic exhaustif du système à travers le rapport d'État sur le système éducatif national, appelé RESEN 2003. Nous avions également instauré la gratuité de l'école primaire. C'est une décision du chef de l'État camerounais pour faciliter l'accès à l'éducation à tous les jeunes Camerounais, fussent-ils filles ou garçons. La création par le gouvernement camerounais de 4 départements ministériels en charge du secteur de l'éducation. Il s'agit notamment du ministère de l'Éducation de base, du ministère des enseignements secondaires, du ministère de l'enseignement supérieur et du ministère de l'emploi et de la formation professionnelle. Nous avions également procédé à l'accélération de l'éducation de la jeune fille, parce que dans notre pays, avec le poids de la tradition, il convient de relever que, comme dans certains autres pays également du continent, la jeune fille n'est pas toujours des plus favorisées en ce qui concerne l'éducation. Il fallait donc mettre un accent particulier à ce niveau. Donc, à travers la recherche de l'équité, qui se veut donc être une réduction des disparités genre. Nous avions également, en prévision, n'est-ce pas, de la conduite du Cameroun vers un pays émergent, envisagé la professionnalisation des enseignements. Nous avions par la même occasion renforcé la création et la construction, puis l'équipement des écoles, des établissements d'enseignement secondaire, des universités d'État et institutions universitaires publiques et privées, et bien entendu des institutions de formation professionnelle. Nous avions également, dans le cadre du gouvernement camerounais, octroyé des budgets conséquents au secteur éducatif. Il convient de dire qu'au fil des ans, le budget alloué pour le secteur de l'éducation croît, et c'est un motif d'encouragement également pour la communauté éducative. Il y a également, j'ai cité tout à l'heure 4 départements ministériels en charge du secteur de l'éducation. Vous allez certainement me poser la question de savoir comment le Cameroun arrive à s'en sortir, comment le Cameroun arrive-t-il à assurer la coordination avec 4 départements ministériels. Eh bien, c'est très simple. Notre pays a pensé qu'il était important de mettre en place un comité de pilotage, lequel est présidé par le ministre de l'économie et de la planification et qui regroupe justement l'ensemble des 4 départements ministériels qui sont en charge du secteur de l'éducation. Il y a donc au niveau de cette instance un secrétariat technique et des cellules opérationnelles qui sont animées par les secrétaires généraux de ces différents départements ministériels. Toutes ces dispositions, mesdames et messieurs, ont permis l'accroissement de l'accès à l'éducation, l'amélioration également de la qualité des enseignements et une meilleure gouvernance du système éducatif afin d'atteindre les OMD à l'horizon 2015. Excusez-moi. La mise en œuvre de ce vaste programme de modernisation nécessite bien entendu d'importantes ressources financières. Aussi, le gouvernement camerounais va-t-il s'atteler à la mobilisation des dites ressources, tant sur le plan international que sur le plan national. Au plan international, je dirais que grâce au concours des partenaires techniques et financiers, le gouvernement a accédé aux opportunités de financement qui sont offertes dans le cadre des initiatives Fast Track, PPTE, avec la Banque mondiale, la Banque islamique de développement, la Banque africaine de développement, l'UNICEF, et a développé également la coopération bilatérale avec la France à travers le CD2, le Japon à travers le projet don japonais, la Chine à travers le projet don chinois, etc. Au plan national, et notamment le développement du partenariat avec le secteur privé. Ainsi, pour optimiser la contribution de cet important secteur à l'atteinte des objectifs fixés, le gouvernement a œuvré à la réduction de son poids tout en procédant à la modernisation à travers la contractualisation. Cette démarche clairement définie dans les dispositions des textes suscités est mise en exergue dans la stratégie du secteur de l'éducation. La configuration nouvelle de l'enseignement privé au Cameroun notamment en ce qui concerne la loi numéro 204 du 22 juillet 2004 fixant les règles relatives à l'organisation et au fonctionnement de l'enseignement privé au Cameroun et son décret d'application distinguera donc deux types d'établissements scolaires ou de formation privée au Cameroun. Il y a dans un premier temps les établissements privés libres et dans un second temps les établissements privés sous contrat. Ceux-ci bénéficieront de l'appui de l'État, donc une subvention financière, une affectation d'enseignants, une dotation en équipement pédagogique et en matériel didactique. En outre, la contractualisation prend en priorité des établissements scolaires implantés dans les zones rurales et les zones d'éducation prioritaire. La pratique de la subvention, caractérisée par le mode de répartition de l'appui financier mis en œuvre à travers les lois de 1976 et 1987 régissant l'enseignement privé, a contribué au progrès du système éducatif, mais n'a pas pu corriger certaines disparités. Aujourd'hui, donc, il s'avère indispensable de corriger cette faiblesse grâce à la mise en œuvre d'un mécanisme de gestion transparente, efficace et efficiente. La contractualisation de l'enseignement privé, prônée par les textes en vigueur au Cameroun, se présente en définitive comme une technique d'intervention qui permet à l'État un ciblage de ses ressources et lui offre la possibilité de pouvoir ajuster ses contributions en fonction des résultats obtenus. Je voudrais ici préciser que nous pensons avoir enregistré de très bons résultats, compte tenu du fait que le taux d'achèvement des filles est passé de 2004 de 49,9% en 2004 à 67,3% en 2012. Le taux brut de scolarisation est passé de 102% en 2004 à 110,9% en 2012 et le taux d'achèvement est passé de 57,9% en 2004 à 73,2% en 2012. Le ratio élève-maître est passé de 57,2 pour 1 maître en 2004 à 52,1 mètres en 2012. Voilà, mesdames et messieurs, les quelques réformes que le Cameroun a pu conduire, non seulement pour améliorer la qualité de l'éducation au Cameroun, mais également offrir beaucoup plus de chances à tous les Camerounais de parvenir à une éducation de qualité. Je vous remercie.
Thank you very much, Minister. May I ask my colleague, James, to share his thoughts and briefly summarize what we've heard.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is James Wanjohi with GEMS Education Solutions based in Nairobi, overseeing our education advisory work with governments and donors for the region. What I would like to capture is some of the consistent points that have come out from this discussion. I think from all the esteemed speakers that we've had, the issue of access is a big issue through either universal primary education or universal basic education that Chris spoke about, and also the minister from Cameroon. I think another issue that came out clear is the issue of quality and quality of education. GEMS Education Solutions work is really around how do we improve quality within governments and countries that we work in. Some of the things that we are thinking about are more futuristic and sort of jumping off the platform of what's currently happening. The one thing that I think, and we are all challenging ourselves to think about, is the question of the role of technology in delivering education for our beneficiaries, the students. Increasingly, I think as we compete with the rest of the world, we then realize that technology is sort of the platform for the future. So that's the one thing. The second thing is we're in a continent that has 1 billion people, 60% of them under the age of 20. Unemployment becomes a big issue. Part of that has been touched by His Excellency Obasanjo. The question of entrepreneurship curriculum in our education system. That's the first part. The second part is the question of the technical and vocational education as a source of skills that empower the youth to become self-employed with skills that they can then generate jobs for others. And that's a question that I think we continue to grapple with. The next one is a question of what's the role of the development partners going forward in shaping our education systems? I think in Cameroon she talked about donors, helping them finance access to, to enabling more people coming to the system. But what's the role of them going forward? The other one I would like to also bring out is a question of the role of the public sector. I see Toku here, I see Helen from Equity Group Foundation. The private sector have a key role in helping the public system to improve and uplift itself in offering more places and giving better quality of education into the system. The other one that I wanted to bring out, which I listened yesterday to a session to Senator Coltart, was the question of creating centers of excellence in the continent. Identifying these young, talented youth, what Chris was talking about, identifying these young, bright, talented children who then can be given opportunities to excel and thrive, and hopefully they can become the future leaders who will shape and change how things work in the continent. So those are just a few points for now I'd like to capture, and I'll maybe make some more comments as we move on.
Thanks, James. I'm also delighted to have His Excellency, the Minister from Mauritius. And so would you please like to join us on the panel and also share your remarks?
Thank you. I would like, first of all, to thank all the organizers for this interesting sharing of ideas taking place this morning here, and pay my respect to all the excellencies and friends on the dais. I'm from Mauritius, responsible for education. In fact, my portfolio is education and training. And in fact, one of the main things that, because we're short of time, so I rush to a few things. One of the important things we have realized in Mauritius is that training, the portfolio of training should be with education. It has in the past been with the Ministry of Labor, for example, or with some other ministries. But our experience shows that with the Ministry of Education, it is much better, it gives better results. Our children joined school at the age of 3 in Mauritius, and education has been compulsory and free since 1976 from the age of 5. Now we are rendering it compulsory as from the age of 3 as from next year, January next year. And I think it has been mentioned by my predecessors who spoke that the better we do at the beginning, the better the results are. Well, this seems to be logical, but in fact with experience we see that it is like that in fact. So we have concentrated in Mauritius on the best we could do from early childhood. We have set up an early childhood care and education authority which takes care of all children going to school between the age of 3 and 5, because at the age of 5 they join the primary sector, and then the secondary at the age of 12. Primary and secondary are the responsibility, direct responsibility of the ministry itself. But the school population between 3 and 5 is taken care of by this authority, which has been set up only 3 years ago and which is doing a marvelous work. The access to pre-primary education at the age of 3, when I took the portfolio 4 years ago, used to be the rate about 83, 84%. That is, only 83, 84% of school children between the age of 3 and 5 were attending pre-primary school. Now, with this authority set up, and of course lots of other works we have done together with the authority, the access rate is about 98%, nearing 100%. And it has been 100% for primary school age children for years, and education is free also for secondary, entirely free. It is also free, I must say, at university level, although there is some stipends to pay, but entirely free from age of 3 to the age of 20 when the school children leave secondary school. Transport has been made free for children because we believe we have to give equality of chances, of opportunities. It's not only the school is free, but the child cannot come to school because the transport is a problem. We give free books to all the children in primary schools, not secondary. Secondary, it's only for those who are in difficult circumstances, families who are, let's say, poor. But for primary school children and pre-primary school children, books are entirely free, given to all those who come to school. That is 100% of the population. And we have, for the past 4 years, realized that although we have been doing well on the academic side, but on the citizenship, for example, citizenry, there have been difficulties. People, students leave college at the age of 20 with very good results at secondary school. The pass rate is above 80%. And in life, they do not happen to succeed the same way they have succeeded in their studies. So there must have been weaknesses. There are weaknesses here and there. And we have gone deep into the system, and we've seen that school must be the place between 3 and 18 or 20 years that the children are with us. That should be the place to give them all the skills they need, life skills as well as they are taught, what is in our books, and what can be given to them through teacher-children relationship. We therefore have introduced at primary level what we have called the enhancement program after school hours. Teachers are paid for that. After school hours, children follow special classes insofar as life skills are concerned, sports are concerned, arts and culture facilities are given to them, where they are given the opportunity to learn more about what is not in the books, for example. And at the same time, we have started digitizing our classrooms. We have ended with 2 classes in the primary school level, which is, from standard 1 to standard 6. In fact, it's mostly like that everywhere. And 2 standards 4 and 5 have already been digitized. We have the Sankore project, which is working well in our country, where teachers teach no longer with on the blackboard, although the board is still there in the classroom, but they teach through the ICT principles, and classrooms have got a big laptop, they have got a whiteboard and a projector, and interaction between teacher and pupils take place within through this system. And children learn, really this is a new method of pedagogy, children learn more quickly and better. The results are there, we have already seen it in the 1 year that we have introduced the system, and we are continuing to digitize all the classrooms. So we make it interesting for the children, and we believe that the atmosphere at school must be enhanced. Children must be taught to love their school. And in Mauritius, we keep saying that when Friday, because on Saturday and Sunday there is no school, when Friday comes, the children should tell their parents, why do I not go to school on Saturday? Because school is so interesting. So we have to attract children through the better atmosphere that is set up at school. And we are also running, I'll end on that, we are also running along the sustainable development path. So in our schools, all the children are taught, for example, how to segregate waste in the school. And a step further has been reached using the organic waste to produce compost. And this is done in almost all our schools. Once the compost has started to come up in schools, primary and secondary, then we say, what are you going to do with this compost? It is better used by farmers who are around the school, and therefore they come and buy the compost at a cheaper price and good type quality compost from the schools. So all this going in the sense of improving the sustainable development aspect of education. Rainwater harvesting is done in almost all our schools. We collect the rainwater when rain falls to be able to do the washing of the schools, the cleaning of the schools, and irrigation also. We are causing the schools' yards to be planted all over wherever we can put plants, so that the atmosphere also, the temperature in the school yard becomes more agreeable and more acceptable for the children. We are also now just started on a pilot project, 15 of our 250 schools we have at secondary level, and we are piloting a project for production of electricity through the sunshine, I must say, which we have plenty in Mauritius, with some, you know, we place these captors of sunshine on the roofs of the schools, and this produces electricity. And electricity is used, of course, for the school itself, but we have so much sunshine and the excess, and there is plenty of excess current that is produced. We sell it to the Central Electricity Board. They get it and use it for electrifying other places, and schools get revenues also. And at the level of secondary schools, one follows the other. And once we start on one thing, then we see there is something interesting which is coming. And that thing interesting which is coming is entrepreneurship programs in schools, entrepreneurship education. Once we have started getting revenues through, I said, compost selling, for example, and production of electricity in excess, these are used by the children, and we decided that we should introduce entrepreneurship education at secondary school level, so that on the one hand, the children learn the skills, and on the other hand, they are having also practical sessions, because they are producing and they are getting revenues for the schools. Entrepreneurship education will start in Mauritius next month at the levels of secondary education, forms 1, 2, and 3, obligatorily. And then it will be optional for children to choose afterwards if they want to continue on that. This is going to be a major breakthrough, because we want, through this entrepreneurship education, not only to give these skills to the children, but we believe, we don't want through this to make all of them run businesses, for example, when they leave school. But at least they will learn to stand on their own feet. And wherever they will be in any sector of activity they could find themselves in, whether they are helping the businesses of parents or their own, or whether they are going to join other sectors of the economy, that knowledge that they would have grasped at secondary school through entrepreneurship education will teach them to stand on their own feet and be better citizens of tomorrow. And to end, I must say that we are also very much involved in moral values, which we believe have to be inculcated in children right from the early age. We are a multiracial society, and we have had vertical pillars for different communities, knowing their cultures and so on. But now we are setting up horizontal pillars to strengthen all these vertical pillars, so that the Mauritian society could be a society where one understands the culture of the other as that guy would have understood his or her own culture. This is what we call interculturality, which is joining with what we used to have, multiculturality in the country, to make the foundation of the society stronger than what it used to be in the past. So, well, there's so much we could continue to say insofar as education is concerned, but I think I'll better stop here, and we could react probably to one or two queries. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you very much, Minister. It is absolutely fascinating to see that while there are very different elements which are being talked about, I think there are some very common themes that are emerging, whether they're about the employability, whether they're about the fact that there is diversity even within the system. And then, of course, there's an element about role model and entrepreneurship, which seems to be coming out quite actively. On the other hand, there are also some very unique challenges, such as refugees, which have been highlighted. There has been the issue of new languages or which language you teach in. And of course, there's an impact of the recession, which was mentioned in terms of how it plays through to the education sector. At this point, what I'd like to do is open the floor to questions. We have about half an hour for questions, and somebody will come to you with a mic, and we'll take it from there. So, if I may start with the lady right here. Please. If you can please say who you are and which organization you're from, and if the question is directed to someone, please do let us know.
Okay, my name is Tokumbo. I work for Wanjohi Foundation. This question is directed to our president. We adopt schools. We have 28 schools that we've adopted, and we're going to adopt 24 more this year. By 2015, we plan to adopt 100 schools. Now, when we adopt them, we look at infrastructure, we look at teacher training, sponsorship, early childcare, building ICT labs, and working with the community. I think a lot of the discussions that went on yesterday was like, don't reinvent the wheel. And you being president before, I think you can also help us and direct us on how we can succeed in our cause. The first one that is a major concern for me is teacher training. From what I hear now, if you can't get into university in Nigeria, you can't get into polytechnic, you can get into a teacher training college. Now, if you get into teacher training college without the basic knowledge, how can you effectively teach the kids? And if we're not producing good teachers, what is the point of even trying to train the teachers in public schools? So, I mean, there's a massive gap there. The second thing is, why has early childcare failed? Practically no public schools have early childcare. The policy is there by the government, but they have a classroom. All the schools have a classroom. I've seen it, but there's nothing in the classroom. So why has it failed, and what are the learning points? The last is curriculum. You mentioned it. ICT, again, is non-existent in the public schools. I believe the last curriculum that was written for ICT is so archaic, and they believe that they're going to use that now. How can the private sector intervene to assist in basically developing a new curriculum that will allow these kids to be able to compete properly in the real world? And that way we can say that we are truly producing a world-class basic education for these kids. Without that, I don't think we can say we're providing world-class curriculums for them. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Since your question is almost entirely, or your questions are almost entirely directed to me, let me take them. I think you have raised 3 issues. Adopting a school. What do you do and how does it work? ICT. And I believe the third question is curricular. I believe that the purpose of you adopting a school is to serve as a model. Because if you adopt one school, or even in Lagos, which you know very well, adopting 10 schools is like a drop in the ocean. But if you're adopting that school, will serve the purpose of being a model for either others in the private sector to follow, or for the public to emulate. yes, I believe that you must have an objective beyond just adopting a school. Now, that would be the point I will make about adopting a school. Then you talk about teacher training and ICT. I believe today with ICT, teacher training can be tremendously improved without taking teachers out of school. GEMS Education has been doing that, and I believe that one of the things that GEMS Education and the Federal Ministry of Education in Nigeria have been looking at is how do we improve teacher training without really getting the teachers away from their classroom. And I believe ICT, visual education and all that can do a hell of a lot in that. The third point of change of curricula, I feel strongly, and most of the presenters have made the same point. We must tailor our curricula in schools, but particularly in the university, to bringing out job creators. And I mean that. And take the way we have been trying to do things. Normally, in the university, you have Department of Agriculture. And what do? Agric economics, agric science, and all that. And we say, it should no longer be Department of Agriculture. It should be Department of Agric Business. So that you are now, you change, and people know that by the time you leave, you have written a project, you have attempted to start a project, and you have seen that, yes, you can write a feasibility study or a proposal, you can see it through. So instead of staying in the university for 4 years, you stay in the university for 5 years. But when you come out with a little bit of money and ideas and all that, you can actually be self-employed and almost immediately be an employer of labor yourself. Now, we have to do that. Not just saying, look, yes, I have come out of university with a degree in agriculture, and then you are neither a farmer, nor an entrepreneur, nor anything after your 4 years with a degree in agriculture. And what we are saying now is that, look, with a degree in agribusiness, after 5 years, not only will those who are who are farmers willing to take you on, you are also ready to be a farmer yourself and dirty your hand. Maybe because I'm a farmer, this is why I feel strongly this way. But that is probably the sort of way we have to do. We have to think differently. We have to think out of the box. We have to, in fact, really start looking at things. Well, making compost is one thing. And if you leave out, you come out of school, you can live on actually making compost and be an entrepreneur in compost making, and you sell it. Now, one of the most enterprising young man in Nigeria I saw, he left school and he discovered that there is a felt need. In Nigeria, we are very good at going to parties. And so you have these parties, and there's never a place where you can you ease yourself, no toilet, no nothing. So this man started making toilet, and he will put them at the parties and get money. Now, and his slogan is shit business is a serious business. Now, today, this young man has established himself all over the country and is employing well over 500 people in shit business. That's thinking differently, thinking out of the box. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Minister.
Yes, thank you very much. My name is Bukari Savadogo, and I am the Education Sector Manager of the African Development Bank. First of all, I would like to thank President Obasanjo and all the panelists for their insightful presentation. I just wanted to add quickly, because of time constraint, I wanted to add the perspective of a Pan-African organization looking at education for all of Africa, all of 54 African countries, and not just from the perspective of one country. The African Development Bank has been supporting education in Africa for the last 40 years. And so we have accumulated some amount of experience, but we cannot get into the details, of course, of that today. But what I just wanted to say is that in all our projects, we try to support countries to reach the 3 generic objectives, which are access, quality, and relevance. And we don't only support project and program, we also engage in policy dialogue with government to help shape better policies. We provide technical assistance, and we do economic and sector work to generate more knowledge for decision-making in education. Currently, the bank is finalizing its long-term strategy for the next 10 years. And within this long-term strategy, we are developing what we call a comprehensive human capital development strategy, because we do believe that the 1 billion Africans constitute the biggest asset of this continent for its development. If we can provide this 1 billion people, or at least a sizable portion of this, a proportion of this, with the right skills. Within this strategy of human capital development, we are developing what we call a new education model in Africa, or called NEMA. This drove from the experience of 40 years, but it also looks at the continent, its challenges, especially youth and employment, but also what is going on in the world, what we have in terms of opportunities and possibilities. And we have synthesized this new education model under 6 key dimensions that I will just mention quickly. I will not get into the details. The first dimension is ICT and education. And a good illustration of what we do in that is the African Virtual University based in Nairobi and covering 27 countries. And we hope that we will keep helping African Virtual University to cover the entire continent, to bring the best of education in the world to African students. This is the first dimension, ICT. The second dimension is public-private partnerships in education. This topic has been discussed at length yesterday. I will not get into details. The third dimension is the linkages between educational system and labor markets, precisely to help address the issue of youth unemployment or underemployment. So we feel that there should be a stronger linkage, and what we are doing in supporting country, we try to integrate this third dimension. The fourth dimension is to help educational system to produce students who are critical thinkers and problem solvers. This means the student will not just come to education to learn, to master subject matters, but to develop their brain power so that they can help solve problems whether it's employment problem or simply inserting oneself in active life. The fifth dimension is participation, participatory. We feel that education is too serious to be left to educator alone. In other words, all stakeholders, whether it's parents, the private sector, donors, local community, the students themselves, they have something to say about how we design education program and how we deliver, and they should be involved. And the sixth one, is evidence-based. Unfortunately, in many cases, there have been some decisions that have been taken in education without a strong analytical background to support the choices that are made. And we have come to the conclusion that it's absolutely necessary to have this evidence-based, and when we are intervening in education, we want to see some kind of arrangement for impact evaluation that will show how actually we have contributed. So, in a nutshell, this is basically what we are trying to do. As I said, I will not be long, but if you want more details, you can see it in the bank website, www.afdb.org. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Honorable Minister from Gambia wanted to
got the mic here.
Thank you very much. My name is Dr. Mamadou Tangara. I'm the Minister of Higher Education, Research, Science and Technology of the Gambia. Distinguished panelists, ladies and gentlemen, all protocol duly and respectfully observed. Please allow me to single out His Excellency President Obasanjo, my two ambassadors, the one in the Gambia who is the Dean of the Diplomatic Corps, the Nigerian ambassador, and our ambassador in Abuja, fondly and respectfully call him Baba. So I will also call him Baba. I want to thank all the distinguished panelists for the insightful presentation and share our thought about higher education. And I think, Baba, you hit the nail right on the head when you said that our problem is the curriculum. We need to reform our curricula, because for ages, we rely on donors to help us develop even our curricula. And so we continue seeing ourselves through the eyes of others. And my president used to say that the worst virus that Africa is suffering from is ignorance. Because you cannot understand the amount of wealth that we have in Africa and the abject poverty in which we are living. Our distinguished panelists from Kenya mentioned the young lady from Sierra Leone. Whilst Sierra Leoneans were killing each other, you have a group of mercenaries protecting diamond fields, mines, and then exporting it. So I think if you want to get out of this vicious circle, the key is education. And education can only be effective if we reform profoundly our curriculum. You take example of countries like South Korea. I had the opportunity to visit South Korea as a foreign minister, and I left with a feeling of anger, frustration, and admiration, for the simple reason that I was told that in the 60s, South Korea was at the same level with Ghana, and Kenya was even ahead of South Korea. But today you see the gulf between these countries, you start asking yourself questions. You ask yourself, what's wrong with Africans? So I still insist that we need to reform our education system. And I like to quote Simón Bolívar. He said that las naciones caminan con el mismo paso que camina marchan con el mismo paso que camina su educación superior. Meaning that the pace of development of nations can be measured through their education, higher education system. And I think we can use the example of the Gambia to illustrate these words of wisdom of Bolivar. Because the Gambia, 30 years after independence, we were heavily relying on, up to today, heavily relying on foreign expertise because we do not have a university.
Today, if Nigeria decide to withdraw the technical assistance in the judiciary, our system will collapse. So, Baba, I know how dynamic you are. I hope you will champion the cause of education at the continental level so that we see a better and plan a better future for the next generation. Thank you.
We have time for 2 more questions. Given how much excitement there is, I've lost all the mics.
One is here. Thank you, sir. My name is Peter Adwok, and I hope you wouldn't mind me talking while sitting. I want to thank the panelists. I really enjoyed their presentation and really agree with most of what they have said. Having said this, I want to just make a few remarks on the issue of access. While access is really something which we all agree and accept, I think it must be matched with adequate funding. And this has been the problem, really. And that's why I think that the issue of private-public partnership in education becomes an important point here. Because without access, without adequate funding, then you have an inverse relationship between access and quality. And I come from South Sudan, responsible for higher education. But our higher education is, in fact, we still have a lot of relics of the Sudanese higher education system, which in 1990 started to suffer a lot of it suffered a lot as a result of the declared policy of, they call it the revolution in higher education, which made access to higher education open to all Sudanese, which meant that in every state in the Sudan there was at least one university and one technical technical college. But this was done without pumping in funds into this system. So what happened? We had universities which have just overnight, which were actually, they were secondary schools turned into universities overnight, and they brought teachers from the other universities which were there. And the result is that the standard, the academic standards, the quality of higher education in Sudan has plummeted. So I think it is important. The other thing is I agree that the content of the curriculum must be relevant to the situation in the country. Must be relevant, because without relevance, then you cannot really talk of excellence. So the two things, in order to be able to achieve excellence in higher education or in education in general, it must be relevant to the conditions of the country. This is what I want to say. Thank you very much, Mr.
Are there any thoughts from the panel on that?
I want to say something in that. If what you are saying is that we must not have access so as not to lose quality, I don't agree with you. Please, please, because whose children should not have access? Your children will have access? If the children of the poor farmer, the poor man in the ghetto, in the village. No, I don't agree with that. Now, the problem is this. If you will save money from waste, I do not believe that there's any country in Africa that cannot afford funding basic education. I do not accept that. With all the things that we, but if you see the amount of waste that goes into education at every level and in every country, you will then shudder. I do not accept that access should be denied on the basis of so-called funding to any child in Africa. Because if you say that, what we will be saying is that, well, wait until we have the money. And when we will have the money, we will never have the money. That's number one. Number two, I believe that the private sector going into education can also help in the quality that you are talking about. What I have seen in Nigeria is that, in fact, the private sector universities are now beating the public sector universities. We have 3 levels of university education: the federal government, the state government, and the private sector. The federal government used to be on top. They used to have the high quality. Then we have a situation when the state universities start having better quality. In fact, they beat some state university, some federal universities. And now private universities are even beating state and federal universities. Private, and that is where, for me, public-private partnership comes in. But please, in the name of all that is best for Africa, we must not deny any child access to education for whatever reason. Funding, inability, or being handicapped, because that's another thing. What do we do with physically handicapped children? Should they not? Because if we talk of lack of access, we will even forget those completely. For me, education in Africa must be accessible to all African children.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency. If I may just add, I think there were a statistic which was absolutely staggering yesterday, which the Honorable Minister David Coulthard shared regarding Zimbabwe, where he said of the $500 million that is spent on 3 million children, which is almost like $170 per child, only 39 cents of that actually makes it to the child. So only 1.2 million is what that makes all its way through. And your point about the wastage is absolutely valid. The other observation I would say is, I'm leading the expansion of GEMS into Africa. And one of the big things that we see when we have just started in Kenya, we are going into Uganda. And one of the things we saw is the moment we have had a school, you have seen that a lot of schools around the area have started to upgrade their facilities and upgrade their academic curriculum just by the impact. So what we believe in is that as we bring best-in-class practice into any market, what it does is it forces the other people who are already there to actually lift their game and try to match, and that improves the quality and, as a benefit that we would see, access later on to education, which is, I believe, I completely agree, should be a universal aim. Time for one last question. Sorry, I'm really sorry, we are running out of time. So I know we've got His Excellency the...
Thank you very much. I actually wanted President Obasanjo to relate the second issue after access, which was curriculum, with the experience of Mauritius, the enhancement program, which they do in the schools to impart skills to students. If we did as Mauritius is doing, we copied that with variation. Don't you think when our students graduate from universities that they would have a foundation of skills?
Would you like the Honorable Minister?
Yes, to comment on it.
Yeah.
The President to comment on
question
it,
for the Excellency, just
yes.
to know. Well, it is in fact because I have the mic. Just thank you for this question. In fact, we have proved, we are proving and we have proved that through the enhancement program, and at the same time, not only what, it needs training of teachers at the same time, because those teachers are teachers of primary schools. And in primary schools, the teachers, there's one teacher for all the subjects. And we are putting more responsibilities on their shoulders because they have the children at an early age, and we want the skills to start in the minds of the children at that age. And we are convinced that when these children will go to secondary schools and then later to the world of work, or to university, then the world of work, these children will be more equipped to be able to face life, because we have come to across many of our even laureates, the cream of the cream, who have got the best results, 5 A+s in secondary leaving certificates, but then who cannot solve very simple life problems. So many, the society gets entangled in so many other problems which crop up. But therefore, we believe that at the same time that we are imparting these academic skills to the children, they must learn so many other skills, and all this has to go together hand in hand. And this is why we have also in Mauritius started new curriculum framework for the past 2 years for each of the pre-primary sector, the primary sector, and the secondary sector. We have worked out new curriculum frameworks for all these sectors, where this development of life skills, moral values, sports and physical education, and arts and culture from the early childhood age, and this continues the children until they leave school, so they become better citizens of tomorrow. Thank you. Now I'll pass the floor to His Excellency.
Thank you very much. I think we have run out of time. This has been a fascinating session. I know there are lots of questions, but please do reach out in the coffee break. Thank you very much. Really appreciate it.